Okay, so I'm hoping everyone can see my screen here. Nicole, I can see you there. So you're the person I'm using as my guinea pig, for want of a better phrase. Okay, so thanks everybody for joining us today for our Powering Podiums on the topic of succession planning. I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement and say here at PISE we gratefully and respectfully acknowledge that our workplaces here at CSI Pacific exist on the traditional, ancestral and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, Lil'wat, Esquimalt and Songhees nations of the Coast Salish peoples. Today I'm at home in Sydney and I'm speaking to you from the traditional territories of the Wasanich people, where I am fortunate enough to live, work and play. So welcome to our Powering Podiums. For those of you that have not been on a Powering Podiums before, it's a partnership between CSI Pacific and VIA Sport, and our focus today is on the topic of succession planning. So we're going to stick with our normal format and we're going to hear from an expert in the field. We're going to talk about sharing some best practices from the province of BC through some short presentations. Those presentations will be sort of 15 to 20 minutes long. And then we're going to go into some breakout rooms for some discussion. So I've got 2 or 3 questions for you to look at in those breakout rooms, and then we'll come back and maybe ask a few people to report back. We've got a lot of people on the call today, so we probably won't ask everybody to report back. And then we'll hopefully maybe have a few questions and some takeaways at the end there. So introduction, which we're kind of going through now. Today's why. I'll introduce you to our presenters here. That's Diane Scheidler, Brian McCalder and Robert Bettauer. Breakout rooms, and then those closing comments and takeaways. So when I think about succession planning, my first thought always goes to that TV show, and I'm still not sure how did Tom Wamsghan become CEO of Waystar Royco, succeeding Logan Roy, and I wondered and I worry about Shiv and Kendall and how they will feel. So those of you that have seen that show will understand what I'm talking about. Those of you that haven't won't have a clue, and those of you that are going to watch it know how it finishes now. So should have probably said spoiler alert at the beginning, but I didn't. So let's look at succession planning then. So just a little bit of research that I did. We see succession planning as a deliberate, proactive process that forecasts the organization's leadership needs. It's an opportunity to look at the future of the organization. And one of the things that I found out is that organizations with formal succession plans outperform those that don't have one. So we're going to talk today about the who, the how, and the when, and hopefully it doesn't go like the Waystar Royco succession planning. So we always come back to this question: why should the high-performance sports system care about the topic that we're talking about? So in sport, we know that athletes retire and coaches move on, and that change is really the only constant in sport. But staff also move on, and that can cause challenges in both governance and operational branches. And if your succession process is not well managed, then the organization suffers, which in turn affects the athletes. So everything we do in sport is focused on athletes. So succession is not right, it can lead to challenges that can be problems for the athletes. So the goal of this webinar is to provide sports with some tips in succession planning. And a great thing here is that Beacon HR are going to provide a 30-minute consultation, not consolation, apologies for that, Diane, for registered attendees. So let me go ahead and introduce our speakers today. So Diane Scheidler is Head of People and Culture at Beacon HR, and she holds a Master's in Organizational Development from the London School of Economics, and she's a certified compensation professional. I found out, Diane, that Mick Jagger also went to the London School of Economics, but he only went for 1 year. So you graduated from there, so you're one ahead of Mick Jagger. So well done there. In Diane's spare time, she does some work in architecture and interior designing, and I'm not sure if it's one of her goals here, but we may see her one day on HGTV. And in terms of sports, she's currently working with snowboard, with the Canada Snowboard Federation as their third-party HR business partner. So she's got some understanding of how the sports industry works. So today we're also going to hear from Brian McCalder, and most of us will know Brian from his time at athletics. He spent a long time there from 1974 to 2023, and as you can see, won a number of awards there, and you can see Brian's achievements there. But one of the reasons that we wanted to get Brian involved in this is he would have such a breadth of experience through the time that he spent in a really key position with one of our bigger sport organizations. So it's great to have Brian along. And then we're also going to hear from Robert Bettauer. Robert is currently the CEO of the Pacific Institute for Sport Education, and he's still heavily involved in coaching within the community. And if you've been watching the tennis for the last few days, you'll have seen a little bit of Robert working as an analyst for TSN. So it's great to have Robert around. He's been immersed in the sports system, not just in BC, but across the country for a number of years. So I think we've got three great people here to talk to us today, and really looking forward to hearing from them. So without further ado, let's hand over to Diane from Beacon HR.
Thank you so much, Andrew, and welcome everyone to this really informative webinar. We're really excited to talk to you about some best practice that you can incorporate within your club. So on that note, next slide, please, Andrew. Okay, so just a quick agenda for my session. I'll start with an overview, just again, of why succession planning is important. And then I want to give you some practical steps for some of you that have maybe have gone through the exit of a key coach or player. I'm sure it resonates with you how stressful it can be. So my goal today is to give you some concrete steps that you can really take immediately. And then we'll summarize again why it's important to make sure that you're planning well ahead. Okay, and next slide. Okay, and as you've heard, succession planning is really the process of proactively planning for when key talent within your organization leaves. And the key word there is proactively identifying and developing talent. And we're really going to focus on how you do that. Next slide. And so what is involved from your perspective? In the most simplest of terms, at the end of the day, you'll need to identify potential successors and mentors that can work with either your existing internal staff or perhaps you have to look externally. And in doing that, we'll talk a little bit about how you can develop a network with other clubs and organizations who can support you. And then finally, we're going to walk through some key considerations when you're selecting key talent who can step in when needed. And next slide. Okay, so what do you really need to think about when you commit to a plan? Well, first and foremost, you need to ensure that your club is prepared. I'm sure many of you can identify if you've lost either a head coach, being a good example, like a key athlete. Sometimes you might have felt that you just completely left in the lurch. And it can have a serious impact to any club, especially, where a key personnel are concerned. And also it doesn't necessarily have to be even a head coach. You may have people behind the scenes, maybe they're in more, back office administrative roles, but they still play a key part in your organization. And they can also wreak havoc really if they leave suddenly and you don't have a backup plan. The other thing that is really important to consider is the time and money that you could incur if you are scrambling at the last minute to replace somebody and you don't have a plan. Again, just your time alone in finding key personnel, even the cost of potentially, if you're working with a recruitment agency, there's a cost involved. Those costs add up quickly. And, it causes a sense of instability with your club as well. So succession planning and committing to a plan, it really helps you to identify early on any risks that may occur or that could occur with your club if somebody, either again, a back office person, a player or a coach leaves suddenly. As well, going through this exercise, it'll just be a good head start to see who's actually out there and just to formulate a strategic plan in terms of next steps, things that you could do if somebody were to leave. So let's dig deeper into that. Next slide. Okay, so we're going to talk through all of these points in turn, but the reason that succession planning is so important, it really does force you to take a look at your key personnel and focus on those key roles in the organization that really do need a succession plan. And having said that, not every role necessarily needs a plan. So, you want to focus on the top or key positions that have the most influence in the club. And it really does allow you the time to assess some core technical skills, as well as soft skills that are needed. It'll allow you to come up with a plan for those future successors. And also you'll be able to tell if you have somebody internally that can step up and take on a key role, or if you need to go externally. And just having that information well ahead of time, it just helps you to properly prepare. If you do have either internal or external people lined up that you feel could be a future successor, you may discover that they don't have all the skills that you would need eventually down the road. So it's a great time to put together a development plan for those individuals. And then finally, once you have a routine of planning and preparing for the future, it'll help to enhance your club's reputation as a key sports organization. Because if somebody were to leave unexpectedly, at least you could act quickly, get somebody in place quickly who is known, and you're not scrambling. And it just lends itself to the stability of your club, just being proactive.
Show, because I am appalled at the number of white, blonde, pretty girls.
Hey, Mary, you're not on mute.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so step one, as I mentioned, is important to identify those key positions. So when you're looking at, what are those key roles, it's important, take a look as well at other roles that they may not seem as high profile, but again, it could be a financial controller for your club or a treasurer. Make sure that you're looking at, even where it may not be so obvious, roles that if somebody were to leave, it would have major repercussions to your organization. And also consider roles that really hold the club together. There are certain roles that maybe, they're more motivating for the athletes. They may be the mentorship type roles that exist already, or just the great communicators. If those people leave, how would it affect your club? So you'd want to analyze, again, just looking at all of your staff, where would you have some serious gaps if those people left? So that is step one. And step two, and next slide, is really looking at those required skills that you need, but also look at the skills that you would need for the future. So as an example, if you start to plan, if you have an assistant coach, head coach, and you want that person to ultimately become the head coach, you would also want to take into account not only the skills needed for today, but the skills needed for tomorrow. And the other aspect of that, of course, is to consider not just the technical skill set, but soft skills. Sometimes, again, it's more important to have a great communicator on staff, or someone who's just really organized and disciplined, and really holds everything together. So really consider those soft skills. And then once you have a set of skills on paper, you want to rank order those skills, because oftentimes it's impossible to find everything that you need. So at least, if you're looking externally, at least rank order the ones that are must-have skills. And then finally, it goes without saying, sometimes you can find somebody with the perfect set of skills, but if they're not a fit for your club, it won't work. So you also need to consider, what does a culture fit look like in your club? Consider your values as well. And also performance levels. What level of performance do you need? Does it have to be, top of class? Can it be an intermediate level? Innovation is really important these days as well. You want to be thinking ahead to an innovative landscape. There's a lot of technology out there today, and you want to make sure that, again, you have someone who's equipped for the future of the sport and has a technological aptitude as well. Okay, and step three. Step three is really, where the rubber meets the road. This is where you're looking at an actual list of talents of emerging. It could be emerging players or coaches, or as mentioned, other support staff. And you don't want to pigeonhole yourself by just focusing on one or two key people. You want to exhaust all your options. So put as many names on your list as possible. And of course, it goes without saying, you want to look at your internal talents who are high potential, as well as external talent. And then get creative when you're looking at potential successors. Sometimes you may not find what you're looking for in Canada. So be open to looking at international talent as well. And, in terms of looking at international talent, it may not be a long-term Commitment. So consider, a short-term contract just to fill a gap that you may have, at least in the short term. And step 4 is really making sure that you don't forget to involve key people, both internally and externally, in helping you put together a list of potential successors. The opinions of your internal team is all important. I mentioned that, culture fit and values are extremely important, and just having an unbiased perspective of all the key folks in your organization, it really makes a difference to make sure that, you're picking the right people for your successors. And then also it's really important to look at other partners. So these could be other clubs where you could review shared options, like sharing a coach if somebody were to leave unexpectedly, or other clubs that could offer mentors. If you have someone who's maybe, they don't have all the skills needed and you need a mentor. So finding those clubs where you could find those mentors is really key. And step 5. Once again, you have your list and you've got buy-in, and when that day comes, maybe a head coach is going to be retiring in a year. You want to make sure that you're committing to developing future talent. So as mentioned, it could be through an arrangement with another club, and you have a feeder club where future talent may be found and you're developing these individuals. It could just be by proactively establishing a mentorship program so that it's ongoing and you're continuously developing. And then, of course, considering other options as well, it could be through partnering with another external organization. I mentioned UBC, they have a coaching program, and maybe, there's options there through UBC also to develop those future coaches. And I've already mentioned sharing coaches. It goes without saying, if you're able to do that, it's a godsend really to have someone who could step in immediately until you find the right person. Okay, next slide. And then if you do take all this proactive action and follow these steps, you'll find that you become a club of choice, because you won't be panicking if someone does leave the organization. You'll be well equipped to have somebody step in and take over. And having that stability and that good reputation, it'll allow you to attract a higher quality of future talent. And of course, when you have high quality talent, it increases, the coach and player retention, it increases loyalty, the stability of the club, and it really enhances your overall brand as a leading sports organization as well. And then just in summary, next slide. Why is it important again? Well, again, you want to ensure that you have a plan for the future, and it is a long-term commitment. It's not a one-time action. You have to continuously look. People do move on. You might have someone on your list that actually has just accepted an engagement. So you want to be continuously refreshing your list. And again, having that thoughtful plan in place, it'll reduce the panic if somebody key leaves, and ensure that your club remains stable. And then in terms of costs, having the plan in place, again, you don't want to be incurring a lot of costs and trying to find the right person. And then finally, have a succession plan is really key to ensuring that your key roles are filled for future needs. But there's a lot of work that goes into it, and I know it can be daunting if you don't even know where to begin with this. So we're more than happy at Beacon HR to help you get started with developing a succession plan. So please feel free to reach out to us. Okay, and if there's any questions, I suppose Andrew, please let me know if we can tackle those at the end if easier.
Yeah, I think that's what we'll probably do. We'll look at those questions. We'll look at those questions at the end. So, Brian, if you want to go ahead and share your screen, and we'll hear from you.
Great, everyone can see that. Is that showing up?
Not just yet, Brian.
Oh, there he is. Yeah, hold on. There we go. How's that?
There we go. That's great.
Great. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, everyone. Nice to reconnect with everyone again. I have a couple of disclaimers, though, to begin with. First of all, my name is Brian, not Nancy. Nancy's the one that knows how to manage all of the technologies related to Zoom. So give her credit, not me, please. And an expert I'm not in human resources, as you will find out as I walk through my presentation. But for the succession, I'm not a follower of that, because I prefer Yellowstone with more overt violence, but I watch it for the scenery only. So If you've not seen either one, I would recommend Yellowstone. My presentation, because I'm usually a bottom line it kind of person, but in order to bottom line it, I felt I had to develop or begin at the beginning here and talk about program growth and organic and growth within the sport and driven by evolving interests in the membership in the sport community, such as road, mountain, ultra, and trail running that evolved probably in the late 70s, early 80s in terms of road running. And most recently, mountain running and ultra running are front and center in a lot of activities in athletics. Off-road triathlon, so that's different. And I hope Al, if he's on board here, is not offended by my use of that. And then high performance, because we don't often, when we are starting out in a sport environment, we're more interested in participation and development, and high performance comes usually at the end as an add-on. So the growth builds on what exists, what the organization is seen to be good at, uses existing resources and experience, what the organization has responsibility and authority for through either NSO partnership, provincial mandate, charter, constitution, community recognition, and authority. And the values and benefits are safer. It's a controlled development, emerging leadership with knowledge and experience. So again, referencing succession, that emerging leadership, knowledge and experience is valuable to know in terms of people moving up in the organization to take over from staff that are leaving. It's not fast paced. It's focused on long-term results, provides time to manage and tweak the new programs. It brings in new participants, members, expanding to new regions and communities, and opens up new sponsor and revenue opportunities. Inclusion and affects the organization's strategic plan. So programs, leadership, revenues, expenses, participation, growth, expansion to new communities, and need for support and services, training, event organizers, coaches, and officials, and again, developing those people who can take over from those that are leaving within the club, within the region, within the provincial sport organization. Planning for staff leadership change, not always front of mind at all levels of the organization, whether that be the club, the region, or the province, because it's, do today what was created tomorrow, so it's ready for tomorrow. So those kinds of things are not always front of mind. Engaging with organizations, human resources committee, giving and receiving notices are important. Know what those timelines are. And for senior staff, my rule of thumb has always been no less than 6 months in terms of CEO or executive director leadership changes. Changing directors and chair of organizations can cause direction adjustment relative to staffing. Senior staff change can have cascading effect on other staff, meaning if you have a well-respected leader in your organization and they decide to leave, you might have others saying, well, I'm going to follow that person, or I'm going to make a lateral move to another organization. Knowing or feeling when change is imminent or necessary. You can always read that in the staff and their enthusiasm and energy towards what their responsibilities are. Sport knowledge and experience is essential. Sport-specific knowledge is a key and a valuable option. Having an operating officer or operations manager, AKA an assistant executive director or an assistant coach, whose duties that are part of existing staff members' responsibilities, so that you are, as a senior staff person, engaging those individual in a lot of decision making, or having them involved in some way that is not necessarily a part of their day-to-day responsibilities in terms of organization, delivery of programs, or management. Implementing change is necessary, not just to change for change's sake. Initiating opportunity to review and amend the existing responsibilities of a position. search internal and external, intrasport specific, intersport specific, and non-sport specific. So identifying those who are potential or preferred candidates, leaders in the sport, leaders in the collective sport community, retiring athletes. A hiring panel is I always used separate from the HR committee. You have an HR committee representative, sport-specific community representative, so someone outside of the existing staff of the organization, but involved in some component of the sport, such as if athletics was hiring a new off-track individual, meaning responsibility for road, cross country, etc. We would bring in someone from that community, a leader in that community who has a knowledge of the sport, has a knowledge of individuals that might be good leaders within the sport organization to lead that area of expertise. And existing senior staff, departing senior staff is an option that can be can be helpful relative to the subtleties in the position of the sport. Sport-specific board member and a hiring panel of 3 is most effective, and with background and reference checks as always. But the panel of 3, hiring panel of 3, ensures there's not a tie in your voting on selecting anyone. So that's my quick overview of how I operated. And you have options there, either calm or dramatic exit. And I have contact information if you want to have, if you have any questions or want any other information.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for that, Brian. Maybe we'll do questions for yourself, Diane, and Robert at the end of Robert's presentation before we go into those breakout rooms. So, Robert, if you'd like to share your screen, it'd be great to hear from yourself.
Thank you. You can all hear me, right? And see that? Are we good?
We can see it.
All right, that's all I needed to hear. Thank you all. Brian, good to see you again. So both Diane and Brian have already covered, I think, in quite a bit of detail, some of the key elements in succession planning. I thought I would share what PISE emphasizes. We're a large not-for-profit sport organization running a major sport institute facility in Victoria, and have a team of about 60 staff, of which 30 are full-time. So succession planning has been and is a very important element. So reinforcing some of the points here right off the bat, I wanted to say that I think we all understand this, that the team, our staff, our colleagues, these are the most important assets of an organization. And within that, succession needs to be identified as a priority within your strategic plan and organizational policies. And if you look at the PISE strategic plan, our 4th major pillar is sustainability and resilience. And within that, we've identified retention, recruitment and retention of our team. And a big part of that is the succession planning. And it also needs to be reflected in your business plan and in your budget. And where that comes into play is that you've set aside a certain amount for professional development and additional experiences for staff members you think internally have an ongoing future with the organization and moving through. I've identified 5 elements very similar to Diane's 6, and I really like Diane's 6 about being an organization that is seen as a best practice and one where coaches, athletes, administrators want to help develop their careers. But within ours, and it's embedded in our policies, is first you need to identify the key positions, skills, and knowledge for which succession is essential for organizational success. And you're going to have various levels. So you're not necessarily going to need detailed succession planning for entry-level positions because, and I think we're all experienced quite a bit of turnover in today's world in that area. But for sure, in the more complex knowledge-based roles, that's where you definitely need to have an idea of succession and timing. And again, I thought Diane's comment was a good one, is that you're looking at both hard and soft skills, and some roles and definitely need the what I identify as emotional intelligence skills, which is increasingly more important in our work world. The people skills, the communication skills, the listening skills. The second element then is to ensure that your job descriptions for key positions are current and updated. I mean, a lot of us have job descriptions, but sometimes we haven't looked at them in 5, 7, or even 10 years. And especially in our rapidly changing world, that they need to be updated and reviewed at least on an annual basis. Next up, of course, is to start identifying potential candidates within your team, and sometimes that is external, that would be strong successors in the respective positions. And hopefully that's something that becomes fairly apparent. Usually it's attitude related. These are team members who are always very positive, are always go a bit above and beyond, are passionate about what the organization is trying to do. And you want to reward and promote that type of attitude. Because that's leadership, and succession does involve developing and growing your leadership. The fourth piece is an important one, and this really often speaks to the capacity issue. And I appreciate that a lot of the organization on this call, you're surviving on starvation budgets in many ways. So I understand that there's a limit to the investment, but the idea of investing in and building the competence of potential successors with professional development and appropriate experiences. And I'll give you an example of how that can happen without necessarily having to add new dollars. There are often situations where you're going to have an individual might have to take a leave of absence. Mat leaves, I think I'm on my 6th or 7th mat leave right now with the organization. And rather than necessarily having to bring somebody external in, sometimes it's an opportunity to parcel out some of the responsibilities to staff that you want to see how they might be able to handle that. You want to see if they can grow into it. So sometimes internally, you'll have opportunities to provide succession, professional development, and experiences through just some of the leaves and changes you'll have in your organization. Likewise, if you have a sudden departure, you don't always have to maybe rush right into replacing that with a full-time position, but maybe share some of those responsibilities and use that as part of your succession planning. And the fifth point is that it's important to regularly assess the status of your succession planning. I mean, if it's in your strat plan and you organizationally are investing a certain amount of money in it, your leadership group, your board, your CEO, senior managers should be addressing succession activities and progress on a regular basis, so that you are ready when something sudden happens or there's a retirement looming. And then this is my final point here. The keynotes are that the investment in time that's required for successful succession correlates to the complexities and responsibilities of the position. So as I mentioned, entry-level roles require relatively little succession and planning. Often you'll use interns as an opportunity to work into those level of positions, and that's a form of succession planning. While senior managers and CEOs may involve a multi-year plan. And I'm sure that Brian can speak to how much advance notice his organization would have had about him leaving the organization. I've shared with my board and my team a 3-year window as CEO of PISE. And so that gives an organization a lot of time to really reflect on what skill sets are required, because the organizations change, the environment changes, so the skill set that might have been appropriate or most desirable for a position over 10 or 15 years may have changed considerably. So if you have thought about succession planning, it's embedded in your policy and how you conduct business, then some of your key leaders, there is a timeline. I mean, I also have a very young team, a lot of folks for whom PISE is their first major job. So I don't have an expectation they're going to spend 20, 30 years with the organization. It's probably a 5 to 10 year window. So that's also helpful in understanding how you plan and how you start to have a successor be, especially an internal one, that you have an opportunity to start giving them some experiences, adding them to committees. In my case, I've had a number of senior staff now take over roles that I've had on boards and committees in Victoria, Vancouver, and provincially, and that's part of that leadership development. So at the end of the day, right, it's a really important part of having a vibrant organization that also is an incentive, I think, for a lot of team members to see that there is a future within the organization for their career development, because that's something that the younger generation, our current generation, they want. What they want isn't just compensation, which of course is important, but they also want to know what the investment is that the organization is making in their professional development, in their career. So that is, let's see, how do I not get out of this? Here you go. End of my presentation.
Okay, Robert, thank you. Thanks very much for that. So what I thought we might do is maybe we'll see if anyone has questions for Brian, Diane, and Robert, and you can either throw those in the chat room there, or you can just turn your microphone on and just ask that question. So let's give it maybe 30-40 seconds to see if we've got a couple of questions. So 30 to 40 seconds can go really quickly or really slowly. So maybe we will not seeing anything in the chat.
Actually, before you run off, Andrew, you know that I'm going to always ask a question.
Yes, Dave, go ahead.
Yeah, so great presentation. I think some of the things that really resonated with me was how we can work together better. So that would be one, and then the other one is sort of around mentoring and using some of the existing knowledge within the system to help. And I mean, to that end, I would just put out a plug for Via Sports resources. So if you go to their resource page, there's a lot of information there around job descriptions and some of the things that were being said. But I guess going back to Diane, just more interested in that mechanics of when you mentioned mentoring, and maybe working together or working across organizations. How have you seen that play out with other organizations, and maybe utilizing somebody that has already succeeded and bringing them back in, or utilizing those skills? So maybe you can comment on that.
Sure, no, I'm happy to, and it's a great question. So I think Andrew had mentioned that I currently am the HR business partner to Canada Snowboard, and that is a technique that they use and deploy heavily just with known experts in their network, where they do have staff changing, moving on, and they have to groom somebody. That is their best practice, is to pull in a mentor to help get that person up to speed, especially when it's more of a technical apprenticeship, for lack of a better word. They need to have somebody who's well known in the field to help that person grow and develop. So that is, and it's just a matter of establishing the network early on, and identifying who are those people that can help on a minute's notice. And, you know, in the case of Canada Snowboard, they tend to use short-term contracts just for a set period of time to have someone come in and help out. If that answers your question, but yeah, but no, it's been very successful. And actually, I am aware as well at UBC, their athletics department also uses that technique of finding those mentors and coaches to help, you know, internal successors be groomed for the next position.
Thanks, Diane, for that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Now, one of the things that we always want to do in our Powering Podiums sessions is to take advantage of the people that we have in the room. And I'm hoping that you can see my screen here. Are you able to see those questions there?
Yep.
So we're going to move into some Zoom rooms here pretty quick. Into some breakout rooms, and what I've done, I have added these questions into the chat, so the questions will be there for you in the chat room, and really they're just maybe a guide to get the discussion going. I think we've got 4 or 5 people in each room, and we're looking at maybe 8 to 9 minutes in those rooms, and then we'll come back in. Obviously, we'll be asking people to make some notes and maybe be the speaker. So I'm going to suggest whoever is the in alphabetical order with the first name would be the person who makes the notes, and the last person in alphabetical order in the group would be maybe the person who would share if there's anything to share. So I'm going to open these rooms here. We do see a few people leaving, but we've got at least 3 people in rooms, so 3, 4, or 5. So should give us an opportunity to have a good discussion. So I'll see you back here in around 9 minutes. Okay, so looks like everybody's back. So hopefully that was a positive experience for everybody. We had, I think, 10 breakout rooms. So I'm maybe just going to ask a couple of rooms just to get us moving here. If I look at room 1, so that's Algis, Scott, Beth, and Dave. I'm wondering if you could share maybe some of the discussion with us from your breakout room, and whether that's around the questions, that would be great. But any sharing is good sharing.
Hey, Andrew, I can maybe summarize just a few things. We certainly had a few of us that were from very small organizations, and the succession planning is quite a challenge when there's only so many people, but also incredibly important as a result. One of the folks in our room was a board member, so coming at things from an administrative standpoint and just thinking about having some of those conversations with people. Sometimes they can be it can be a bit intimidating for folks to hear that there might be a succession plan to replace them while they're currently in the job. So having some of those conversations ahead of time from a sensitive perspective and perhaps based on values in the group might be really helpful. More as an idea of continuing the good work that someone has started rather than replacing them or perhaps undoing maybe some of the things that they've found value in.
Okay, Beth, that's great. Thank you. You know, one of the things that we had heard the past sort of 6 or 7 months as we started to come into this post-COVID sports world was people mentioning that, you know, we're back after COVID, and once we get back to where we were before, you know, pre-COVID, then maybe it might be time to find a new role or a new job. So we kind of felt there might be some of this movement coming, and it's good to hear that you're in a room with people from smaller organizations, because you know, I feel that that's where we need to help support groups, because, you know, you'd think that succession planning might be a little bit easier with a larger organization, but again, I'm not sure if that's the case. But certainly for smaller organizations where there may only be 4 or 5 staff, people tend to do more than just their one role, and maybe that's true for the bigger space as well. So thank you for that, Beth. I wondered maybe if we looked at the room that Kevin Black, Kevin Bowie, and Kevin Matrosov. So the room of Kevin's. I wonder if there's anything to share from there.
Andrew, I see what you did there. You put us all in the room, made it super confusing.
I just realized that I had not done that on purpose, but I will say that yes, didn't I do a great thing there?
We had lots of robust discussion around this. We had both orienteering, who's all volunteer led, and then sailing, who has a small staff, but a really robust board. Also longevity in the staff, so a lot of consistency. And then I didn't speak too much from a VIA Sport perspective because we sort of unpacked a lot of like what's going on at those two different levels, and really looking at two things around like both concern and succession planning, around like if somebody leaves a board and it's very board driven, how do you backfill that? Do you lose forward momentum? And also a bit of like seeing these sort of pending retirements and what to do when you have longevity in an organization. You think about strategic planning, and then all of a sudden somebody kind of goes out the door and he gets a different opportunity. How do you retain those people, keep the knowledge, and then also keep the momentum that you were building? So some risks, sort of challenges in there, especially when we considered people on the board who really are advantageous in fund development and what they bring to the table. And if you sort of succession plan them and you don't find the right fit, it's really challenging to move them along because you sort of could lose a lot of momentum or financial gain.
Okay, Kevin, thanks for that. Wonder if maybe we would look at the room where we had Quinn, Rosemary, Ross, Russell, and Sarah. I think that was room 7. Wondered any discussion came from that room.
Yeah, so we had a pretty good group of people. We had folks from Canada Snowboard, BC Wheelchair Sports, Netball BC, and myself, BC Sport Cheer. And we all really took away how valuable it would be to have a succession plan. At this point, nobody has anything in place. However, we all have different situations where we're losing some key members and really looking at doing some replacement. And we had a good variety where there was board run or volunteer run, and then having very few employees to having several employees. It was really good discussion, but we've all sort of made the promise to ourselves that we're going to start looking into doing the minimum at least, and getting some job profiles written and discussed before we can move on to the succession plan.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Sarah. That's great. Let's see. I wonder if Timothy, Alan, and Valerie, which were room 9, any discussion from your room?
Yes, I'll pipe up. We just basically had a quick discussion just on sort of the status of our staffing and our different staffing structures. Of course, we have a wide variety, with the smaller, us being speed skating being a rather small organization, and then with volleyball being quite a large organization. So it was interesting, and just a general discussion about what's the status of the MEM plans. And I think none of us really had a lot.
Yeah, just
Plans on paper.
Yeah,
So,
lost you a bit there, Valerie.
sorry about that.
Yeah, we just lost the last maybe 30 seconds, I think.
I think essentially we were just saying that it was timely, and that it definitely need to get some plans on paper.
Okay, thank you. Okay, maybe we'll look at maybe room 2. So that was Sean, Frank, Freestyle BC, Greg Moody, I think Greg had to pop out, and Brian. I wondered if anything came from that room, and then we'll move on after this.
I'll just give a quick recap for that group. First question, we were honest and stated we didn't have a formal succession plan. We're smaller groups. We wish we did. Doesn't make an excuse that we don't. And it's something we're hoping to get for in the future. I think a lot of us know there's a lot of different things we'd wish we had plans for. Succession plan is one of them, and we don't. We haven't had, or no one brought up that we've had any real issues regarding filling vacant spots. Tend to be doing them internally, as was just mentioned before by Robert. That's basically the conversation.
Okay, Sean, thank you for that. So I just had a couple of questions myself for Diane really here, and maybe basing off a little bit from what Sean just said, is that if you don't have a succession plan, what's the amount of time from start to finish in terms of having a pretty decent plan? Because we're obviously going to share a QR code with everybody who attended today to get that 30-minute consultation with Beacon HR, Diane. So I'm just wondering what's a good timeline if people don't have a plan?
Yes, that's a great question. And I think that came up in the group we were talking about. You might be in a panic mode, but I would say, and it depends on which roles you're trying to fill, because some roles will take longer. Like the discussion group I was in, we were talking about the role of executive director. It's a key position reporting to the board. What do you do if you're in a bit of a panic? So some immediate steps that you can take just to buy you some time, because it could take a bit of time to find that role. You could have an acting role of somebody who maybe doesn't have all the skills necessary, but they're at least could step in temporarily and be the acting executive director for a short time as you're going through the process, potentially to fill. Some other steps you could take in the interim as well is just starting to document your processes. So when you do find the right person, they can hit the ground running coming in. You just while you're going through the search process, making sure that the onboarding is smooth, just to save you a bit of time so they ramp up quickly. That's another step. But all in all, I can tell you, I mean, for most hiring of roles on average, like 60 days, give yourself 60 days, but depending upon how niche it is, it could take longer. So it's hard to say. But the acting role idea is a good one. And as mentioned, if you have to bring in someone on a short-term contract, just to buy you more time, if that helps.
So obviously 60 days, the usual notice is probably around 30 days. So you're kind of 30 days behind the 8 ball almost there from day one, Diane, I guess, if you don't have anything in place.
I would say executive director, CEO level is going to be more in that, because whoever you're hiring, if they're working, they're going to have to give appropriate notice as well.
Yes.
So they're not just hanging around looking for work for the most part. They're qualified, desirable candidates.
No, absolutely. That notice period, it could be as much as a month, to your point. So it does depend on the role, quite frankly. But yeah, the more senior, usually the longer it takes, because cultural fit is important as well. You don't want to pick the wrong person, just, for the sake of the time. You want to make sure it's the right person.
I think Brian, you have something to add.
Yeah, I would agree. The longer notification time for executive director or CEO positions is absolutely critical. And one thing that we did was that I stayed on for more than a month after the person was announced as the new hire. So that helped in terms of working with them a little bit more, albeit that person was internal to athletics already and had been involved in hiring processes themselves together with me, as well as discussions on major investments and funding opportunities that the association was undertaking. So having intentionally and unintentionally groomed that person. They were familiar with a good number of things that I had responsibility for, and staying on later really enhanced that discussion and engagement and mentoring to some extent.
Yeah, so that sounds like a well organized and well managed succession plan there. I wonder at the other end of the spectrum, and maybe I'll go to you first, Diane, is are you seeing new sort of different trends in the area of succession over the, maybe since COVID? Did COVID have an effect on this sort of stuff?
Absolutely, COVID had an effect, and I'll tell you what happened. What I noticed during COVID, there was a lot of people moving around to different organizations. We saw a spike in salaries too during COVID, for whatever reason, and some people just jumped ship because they were making more money elsewhere. So that was the observation. So you might have had someone as a successor, and then they leave your organization. Then what? So my earlier point was make sure you have several people written down, noted as potential successors. Like, don't put all your eggs in one basket. So that was the key trend, that people were switching organizations a lot.
Okay, and then I guess when the compensation piece comes into it, that just adds more challenge and I'm not sure if drama is the right word, but maybe more drama as well there. So another thing to think about. One of the questions that we put in there was how would you be impacted if you lost key people today? And I just wonder if anybody is in a position to share if they've just recently been through rehiring and been through that succession process, how that sort of went for you.
I can jump in.
Yeah, sure, Valerie. Thank you.
We'd love to, I guess, get the any feedback or thoughts from the group. Speed Skating BC is a very small PSO. We have a longtime key person who is our technical director, who is very much a guru in the sport. She does a lot of contracting for national. She's very highly respected and a very high amount of knowledge of speed skating. She also is a full-time physiotherapist and is expanding her practice, and is finding herself stretched a little thin, so she needs to pull back. So it's a huge loss for us. She has given us tons of warning and is going to be going on contract with us still for key developmental things going through to probably about June. So our approach right now is we're hiring a sort of a technical assistant or a coordinator type person, because trying to hire a really highly technical person in the middle of the season, we thought would be very difficult to do. But there are a number of technical things that have to get done. So we're looking to hire and have had some good response into our posts. So we're hiring a technical person for a 9-month contract, which would give sort of a little bit of a overlap as we do our search for a more permanent technical director. So I think our big question that we're looking for is to replace that kind of, she does hold the degree in coaching, and sort of that high performance knowledge base is a big loss, and sort of looking for different ways to kind of attract a person like that it's still a contract, because we can't afford to pay them full time, which is another tough one. So lots of challenges there. I don't know where you want to pick that one about, but it's a good case study.
I might leave that to see if Diane or Brian or Robert have any suggestions there.
I was going to say, feel free, anyone else on the panel, if you'd like to jump in, but it is tricky. And I go back to one of the points I made was consult with your internal network, because it's all about networks at the end of the day. It's who you know, and just, formulating those relationships, getting the word out there through social media even, But that's what it boils down to. Like, you'd be surprised who you can find through just those social media connections. Oh, I know of somebody, and it starts with that. It's really establishing a strong network. Is my advice, to find the right people, to find the right person.
I would agree. That's so key. And the reference I made in my presentation was emerging activities that are linked to your sport. So when we hired someone for road running, we went to the road running community and we engaged them, and they brought forward possible candidates. So that is quite valuable to look internally within your organization to your volunteers or club people, and because people may want to change and may look to this as a great opportunity.
I'll address the compensation piece. And I think that the one thing that COVID made very clear is that the work environment can be flexible. And I think that all of us are examining total compensation packages, which isn't just remuneration, but it's also work-life balance, benefits, professional development, opportunity to take on additional roles or jobs. So I think that all of us increasingly need to be creative and flexible in the environment that we offer, and that becomes part of the compensation package. Because dollar for dollar, I get that we're going to be outbid by a number of sectors in that area, but we've got some other perks and benefits that we can put on the table.
Yeah, I think the other thing that we're sort of happy about in this approach as well is the technical, calling it a sport technical coordinator position that we put out. Sorry about the background noise. Sport technical coordinator is, we've structured it so that it could be someone from another sport, that is still available to sort of provide that background technically, but we just really need someone that's a really good organizer and a really good, can keep on top of deadlines and have that. So it could be a very good developmental position within from other sports as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for those questions and comments again from the panel. So we'll start here to kind of wind up a little bit. Obviously, thank you to everybody who came on today to spend some time with us. I'd really like to thank our three presenters for sharing their ideas. Really grateful to you for being able to find the time to put that presentation together and spend some time with us today. On Monday, I'll be sending out a QR code to email to people who were on the call today, so you can book that consultation with Beacon HR. So hopefully that's timely for everyone. And we will have a recording of the webinar, and the slides, we'll have those up on our website, hopefully before the end of next week. And when we have those ready for you, we will I will send you an email and let you know that they are up there. So again, thanks everybody for time today, and look forward to seeing you all again probably in the new year. Thanks very much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you.